get a little catch-up session later.
Okay, so ready to start? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the slides? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I guess in this series of kind of quick research, proposal development, division of research presentations. So this is just a broader impacts refresher for those that maybe aren't as familiar with broader impacts, or maybe those that have done broader impacts but just kind of want to, again, like as the name implies, a refresher, maybe think of some alternative approaches to broader impacts. So this will be a very NSF focused and quick discussion. So why is it NSF focused? Well, NSF presents two main criteria when they review their proposals. The first is intellectual merit, which basically is, how is this proposal going to advance your field? It's kind of more field or discipline focused, where broader impacts is, how is this research going to benefit society or generally anybody outside of your field? So it could be all of society, the entire globe, or it could be people in another discipline. So you could be doing some modeling in mathematics, but people in economics adopt your modeling for their own research purposes. That is considered a broader impact. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people in their proposals focus in on the research questions and the research plan, and that kind of falls more in intellectual merit, but they are both reviewed equally, so they both need to be considered equally. So what are broader impacts? So the NSF has their definition of the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal income. So that's kind of a very wordy definition. Again, it's kind of what's gonna benefit people outside of your field or outside of your lab. And I just wanna note too, the difference between a broader impact program versus a broader impact activity. So if you see the photo here, this is a photo from more open times at the University Day at the Mall, where there's lots of broader impacts going on in science education. And in this case, the broader impact isn't making the structure out of toothpicks and gumdrops. It's science education at multiple levels, where you have a kind of K through 12 education, learning about chemical structures through putting together the toothpicks and gumdrops, and also teaching undergrads or even grad students how to do science communication. So NSF has some kind of just suggested areas of impacts, and I'll kind of summarize them here. A real general one is improved well-being of individuals and society. So on our campus, we do a lot of smart energy research. Lithium-ion batteries is one of those. So making energy more efficient, energy storage more efficient, or also, which could lead to less pollution. That's considered a benefit to society. Another big one for STEM and NSF is full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities. This is commonly referred to as broadening participation. This has been kind of ongoing throughout at least the last 40 years at NSF. There's been some movement and some improvement in some of the fields. Some of the fields have just not seen much improvement in being more open to participation. So NSF is continually looking at this one. Improve STEM education, and this could be at any level. So it could be through preschool, through high school, graduate education, undergraduate education, the kind of even the public in general. Just making this public or anybody more literate about scientific issues. Workforce development is, last year or so, has become increasingly important for NSF and a lot of the government agencies, is how can your research help to train our workforce in the United States to just become more competitive. Just in the last few months, Congress passed a bill, signed into law, to specifically focus at veterans groups. So, and training veterans in STEM issues to help their workforce development opportunities. Increased partnerships between academia, industry, and others. So if you have a new technology or new approach that can help industry to become more competitive, that's considered a broader impact. So a lot of people kind of center in on K through 12 education, but industry outreach is another big area for broader impacts. Improved national security, that's one that's kind of like if you're in cybersecurity, some software developments or research that can help like the NSA or government agencies strengthen their servers or kind of protect their digital information. That could be considered national security. Not a lot of people actually do national security based on NSF's kind of own internal review of what people are applying for as broader impact, sorry. And also just increase economic competitiveness of the United States. Anything that your research can do to help our national economy is broader impact. So how do you make a broader impacts program? It's just some questions. So what broader impact do you want to do or address? Do you want to go into STEM education or workforce development? Do you want to do a societal or industrial need? Who do you want as your audience? There's a lot of different groups out there, as we talked about, the general public, K through 12. I just saw a talk from yesterday from Mohammed Noor out of Duke University, who does an interesting one. His primary audience is Star Trek fans or Trekkies. He's an evolutionary geneticist, but he started off kind of using Star Trek episodes as examples for teaching evolution and genetics. He turned those courses into a popular book geared towards the public. And then he's followed that book up by attending Star Trek conventions. He's even just recently was at a Star Trek cruise right before all our recent events. And he's also kind of grown that into being a consultant on the more recent Star Trek episodes. So it's kind of showing where his audience is. He's kind of taken a really specific audience and grown with it. How will you reach your audience? Kind of what your preference is. If you like kind of a lecture format, public talks, if you want more engagement, working with groups to kind of integrate their questions in with your research, and also multimedia approaches or science festivals. It's kind of what you're comfortable with. A lot of, just like you're going to need partners for a lot of research programs, you probably need partners or collaborators to help you with broader impacts. If you want to reach out to a science museum, you need to reach out to them. And what are your objectives? What do you want to see as kind of the final product? So audience, again, NSF is pretty open on who you want to reach out to, K through 12, even preschool, undergraduates, graduates, teachers, so teach the teacher program. So maybe you don't want to go into a classroom, you know, that's not your background to teach fourth graders, but maybe you could teach fourth grade teachers how to teach STEM possibility or STEM approaches. And also consider size. Do you want to be kind of small and concentrated, kind of more engaged audiences or groups that you're working with, or do you want to just kind of a large format? So it's like a large national audience, kind of like a Carl Sagan approach. So also, again, what's your level of engagement? What you're comfortable with. If you are kind of more open and comfortable with social media and having these discussions about your research on Twitter, that could be a dicey situation, but if you're comfortable with that, that could be a really good way to reach your, or disseminate your research to a larger audience. So kind of looking at activities, so learning objectives. What educational gaps do you feel? And this is, I don't know if there's anybody here, junior faculty, that are thinking about the career proposal. This is because the education plan is a big part of the career proposal. And this is kind of your places. You've been through as an undergrad, you've been an a graduate student, you also become a professor or a faculty member, what are the educational gaps that you see? What are kind of the limits? And how do you want to overcome those limits? This is your chance to address those big issues in kind of the education part of your field. And kind of what practices or activity do you want to do, and what do you seek, or what's your objective in doing that activity? There's actually a growing field or literature in the field of STEM outreach and education. So if you have an idea for outreach, other science museums, other universities, other colleges may have already done this activity or a form of it and have been able to show what has worked and what hasn't worked. So be sure, just like you would go back and do a literature review in your research plan, it's a good idea to have a literature review for your broader impact plan. Again, NSF wants to see, how are you going to measure whether you were successful or not? So besides just having an objective, you have to have some metrics to go along with it so you can report back to NSF to see if you were successful or not. Again, with partners, it's good to engage with their needs, ask them what they need. They might have gaps in resources. Maybe you have some equipment that they don't have, and you could help fill that gap. And also remember to budget. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And also it helps to have letters of collaboration for NSF proposals, that if you're going to work like with the Science Museum, it shows that they're committed to this. It's not a letter of support, it's just a letter of collaboration saying that they're committed to collaborating with you. And a very important point, do not wait until the last minute to ask for their support. Partners get very frustrated with this because your broad impacts plan might not fit in with their structure. And if you come to them the last minute, they might be very frustrated on how to figure out how to fit your plan into what they already have. So reach out to them early. As far as budgets for broader impacts, they do cost money. Staff, so if you're having like a STEM summer camp, you're going to need to pay staff to work with the students, whether that's undergrads or grad students, they're still going to cost money. If you're going to go to use a venue for a public speaking event, they might have fees, equipment, supplies. Even if you're an after-school program that's going to different elementary schools and you're going to transport equipment and supplies from the university to that school, you're going to have to figure out the transportation, and those will come with their own costs. And also there's time involved with these impact programs. Budgeting also shows reviewers that you've planned for your broader impacts. It wasn't just kind of a thrown in thing at the end of writing your proposal. It also shows that you're committed to carrying out these broader impacts, and that you're invested. If you don't budget any money for broader impacts, it's going to tell reviewers that you're not taking them seriously. And again, assessment and evaluation is becoming a bigger issue, especially at NSF for broader impacts. They want to see how effective was your BI program. So again, you have to see if you achieved your outcomes. And again, so you have to clearly say what your objectives are, and then how you're going to measure or assess your objectives. Were you able to reach out to students or the public, depending who your audience was? And this is especially important for educational activities and educational research. And for some larger programs, especially if you're at center level, it may sometimes even require to reach out and get an external evaluator. If it's a smaller program, just an individual research program, you probably could just do your own internal evaluation and assessment. Just so quick do's and don'ts. Do consider equally to intellectual merit. Make it forward reaching. So don't write about what you have done as broader impacts. You can do that to show that you have expertise or experience in that, but don't make that your entire program. Make it forward reaching on what you're going to do. Remember to budget, know your audience, describe impacts with metrics and outcomes and be creative. Don't just list activities. It needs to be tied to your research program in a thoughtful way, that it can't just be a kind of laundry list of outreach activities. And again, don't just state what you've already done, state what you're going to do, and don't make broader impacts seem like an afterthought. On some resources, so there's an NSF-sponsored national center called Advancing Research Impact in Society, which just happens to be having their annual conference this week, all virtually. They have what they have listed as 5 guiding questions, kind of questions somewhat summarized here, but maybe phrased in a different way to help guide you on planning your broader impact plan. There's also a broader impacts wizard, which again just guides you through questions on what to think about when you're developing a broader impacts program. If you have a very effective STEM outreach program, there's now a journal for publishing those, so you can get some publishing credit. And also, if you have questions, be sure to reach out to the Office of Sponsored Programs and your Grants and Contract Administrator, and also our office, the Office of Strategic Research Initiatives. Myself, Robert Lawrence, and Kevin Betcher are all here to help. If maybe just brainstorm, or if you're not sure what could work as a broader impact, reach out to us and we can help brainstorm, maybe come up with something with you. I just had some examples too. So the New York Master Teacher Program is kind of a teach the teacher model for kindergarten through 12th grade STEM educators. So these are sponsored by the state for STEM educators that want to kind of go above and beyond the regular curriculum and put kind of higher end STEM education in their classes. But they're also looking for more innovative research that they can include in their class. So it's a way if you have a lesson that you want to bring into K through 12 classrooms is teach the teacher instead of teaching the classroom directly. And we have contacts if you're interested in that on campus to reach out to those students. Kind of an ongoing one throughout for Binghamton is the Go Green Institute, which is housed in the Department of Chemistry. It's a kind of primarily middle school summer camp on sustainable STEM research. And it was initially NSF funded, but was successful enough that it's continued on to today. I'm not sure what their plans are for this summer though. So NASA has a lot of events, and just considering what they're doing now, just to show their websites, they have it by grade level. This is their programs for grade 5 through 8. So they have like some games, like send signal to the spacecraft, some like word jumbles. They even have some physical activities to how to train for an astronaut, even some like building kits. That one was in here before, I'm not seeing it now. It's like how to build your own Mars rover with the materials around your own house. Okay. And then the Exploratorium is another science museum. And this one is for math. Sometimes has some difficulty identifying some broader impact programs. This is one, it's more of an activity, but it's kind of related to STEM education, is kind of explaining the concept of pi. And they just kind of take a string, wrap it around any circle, and then cut it up along the diameter to kind of just help kind of younger elementary school students or even maybe middle school students better understand the concept of pi. And the New York College of Science has they've developed a video game to help explain computer algorithms. That you just kind of, in the game, you have to collect certain helpers to help you collect seeds. And the way each helper has a different attribute, and the way you kind of order these helpers in certain ways kind of mimics how an algorithm might work. So yeah, that's some really quick run through of broader impacts. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I think I was going to next leave it to Rachel to talk about kind of science communication.
Thanks, Mike. So I just wanted to make a pitch for communicating about your work as part of your broader impact. For some of you, that might even be your broader impact. That might look different in the age of this pandemic than it has previously, but it doesn't have to necessarily. And if you're writing a grant now that you may not hear about, for funding for another year or more, I think we can assume that there's at least the possibility of meeting in person again with classes and groups. So under usual circumstances, some of the possibilities for communicating about your work would include the local science cabaret at the Lost Dog, field trips that we organize every spring on campus. We do typically have every fourth grader in the Vestal School District visiting the university throughout the spring semester. And those are really easy opportunities for you to kind of plug into a program that's already happening. You don't have to do a lot of the logistics. You pretty much need to set aside one morning with help from grad students, and we bring the students to you, the kids. There's also a variety of summer programs going on at the university. In addition to the piece that Mike mentioned regarding smart energy, they have a long-running, pretty successful REU in the summer. And again, there's an opportunity to plug into existing programs at Binghamton, including that REU, but also the Summer Scholars and Artists and other programs that have students on campus throughout the summer. There's the SRI, for example, the Summer Research Immersion. And so there are ways of getting those students together as a group. So you might present to them about your area of expertise, or if you have a vision for having students working with you over the summer on your program, there is a way to get them plugged into that bigger set of events and workshops, so that you're not the only person, taking on that mentor role for them. We also have some one-off events throughout the school year that you can plug into. You could, for example, have as part of your plan to present during the day at the mall. That's, again, a very low-level commitment. You, provide some staffing for a booth for a period of 4 or 5 hours. And you have the potential to impact, to reach hundreds of local residents. We also have research days every spring. You could have a booth at the poster sessions. You could offer an open house or a tour of your lab at that time. And let me talk now just for a minute about some things that you can do even under the current restrictions. There's an active Skype a Scientist program going nationally. You can get plugged into that through Twitter, or contact me and I can put you in touch with the organizers of that. Basically, you would get matched up with a classroom. You would have a set time to Skype with that group, usually coordinated with the classroom teacher. You'd take questions over Skype, possibly do a short demonstration if that's applicable in your area. And it's, I would say sort of a step away from the field trip experience, but definitely in that same vein. You can still write for the conversation. We're a founding partner of that group. It's an opportunity where you would write an op-ed in your voice, from your perspective, an opinion piece about some issue of current importance, that's based in your research. You would cite your own expertise, statistics from your field, data you've gathered, or your experience doing some kind of research. You work on the piece with or without help from me or someone else at the university. And then it does go through an editing process at the conversation, but you see all the changes. So it's a little different than working with a true sort of external media outlet. There's also opportunities to partner with existing groups on campus. Many of them are a little bit hamstrung by the current situation. I would guess that the spring round of events organized by the physics department's POP program, for example, was not able to go forward. but I am aware of other groups on campus, including Girls Who Code, where they were able to sort of virtualize their events. So you may be able to plug into something like that. You don't have to start a student chapter of an entire organization and run a months-long series of events on your first time out. You can get your feet wet and take advantage of existing networks like that. Last but not least, I want to say I've seen some really sort of innovative, creative things lately. You could put together some kind of a lesson that parents are able to do with their kids. I've seen kits, I've seen instructions, brief videos right now, even made at your kitchen table can be an opportunity as well in this area. And there might be an opportunity, especially the longer that this goes on, to do something like a virtual tour where you go to your lab, but you're there by yourself, and bring people along with a camera and capture that via video, whether it's live or recorded and used later. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Rachel. I know that's a lot of information really fast. I'd also kind of add that we just started discussions about creating a collaboration with regional Girl Scouts, because Girl Scouts provide a lot of STEM related badges. And they're kind of looking for experts to kind of help Girl Scouts get these badges. So we were in really early discussions about planning for something in the fall, and then COVID happened. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep everybody in the loop on that. Are there any questions? If you want to ask through the chat, or could also, I think the group's small enough that if you want to just raise your hand and unmute yourself. I think Barrett asked about the Star Trek, saying it was recorded. So once I see that link's available, I can send that link out. It was a very interesting talk about how you can go from just coursework and trying to involve students with something like with pop culture, and how you could kind of grow that to a national audience.
Yeah, I definitely want to incorporate in the Evolution for Everyone class 200 students in the fall. That'd be great. I'd have actually a follow-up question about the ARIS conference. In fact, were there sessions, I'd be curious to know, I guess I could go look at the program, but back to sort of Rachel's point of how you kind of develop how these sort of outreach programs are going to be virtual. There's lots of ideas coming around, but I was wondering if ARIS has like a resource page, or there were some sessions specifically around this issue of ways that people could have broader impacts through these different kind of virtual ways.
I haven't seen that specifically. I'd have to go back and look at the agenda. One of the bigger talks yesterday was a panel on doing STEM engagement with communities of faith. It was very interesting. And they showed there was actually a lot of opportunities and openness. Nick?
So I had just a question just about broader impacts in regards to career grants. So I know that the educational component is an important thing, and having, you said, a letter showing that you're going to be working with these individuals will be important. I just wondered, is this something that you would need to implement irregardless of whether or not the grant is funded, or is it something that needs to be implemented before the grant is actually funded during these cases? Because I've heard just from friends that these things tend to be more successful if there's something that's already happened in the past and is going to continue to happen, but I didn't know what your guys' experience was with that. Or
I think reviewers are more receptive to a program that shows some experience or track record. If you're just saying we're starting this program completely from scratch, they might just wonder if that's actually achievable or not. But I think it could be an opportunity to do that, because I've seen other people that have been successful start, especially with the career, starting something from scratch, but they have had showing commitments from groups. So they were able to show that it's not just something they made up on the spot. It's something that will exist if the program's funded.
Nick, I could give an example of that. My office runs the Art of Science competition every spring on campus. And I know at one point we had a faculty member who was interested in doing a version of that for K through 12 students locally. And so she entered our competition. Then she met with us a couple times to talk about the mechanics of it. So then when she incorporated her own version into that proposal, she could say, you know, this builds on this existing thing I'm already part of. And we were able to provide a letter of support as well. So there's also like a kind of hybrid where you're plugging into something that's ongoing, but taking it several steps further. And sometimes that's, I think, a way of showing like, oh, this is an existing thing. It has funding. It has some longevity already. And here's how I'm going to add to it or modify it and make it my own with support from the program.
Thank you. That's super helpful to hear. If we had like specific, you know, I'm someone who's applied a lot to NIH stuff. So the NSF broader impacts is pretty new to me. So if we had specific questions about some specific ideas that we generated, wanted to know to make a point of contact with someone to talk about their feasibility or whether this would be something that would be that like NSF would be interested in, is there a university contact that we could run those kind of ideas by? Or
Yeah, you could stop by our office. You can email me or kind of my colleagues. I think we'll be able to send out the PowerPoint slides. It has those emails listed on them. And yeah, we're here to help. If you just want to run ideas by us, see if it might be feasible. If you need help finding community partners, we can help you with that as well.
all right, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Sure.
So along the lines, I put a chat question into Rachel. Thank you for that response about that. We're sort of going through some of the same stuff that Nick was asking about. My lab has an ongoing Facebook page. It's how we recruit. So I run a lot of kids in the community. It's how we recruit families and kids. I think my Facebook, the lab Facebook page currently has, I don't know, X number of thousand people signed up. Is it a reasonable idea to suggest that I'm going to use that as an outlet for the research? We do this routinely already. We send out newsletters, we send out postings, we talk to our Facebook audience about digital learning and about other related things to what we're doing. Is this an outlet that we could propose to use? I've never done this before in an NSF proposal. We've tended to go more traditional outlets to talk about trying to get into the local media, trying to do things like that. It's not very successful in most cases. But do people do this with their own sort of Facebook channel?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's actually a growing trend. They use kind of social media trends,
right,
kind of hits to see if it's an easier way to track as a metric to see if you're doing engagement. And people call them alt metrics. So if you put out kind of a Facebook post, you can pretty quickly see what your engagement is based on Facebook's kind of own metrics, like how many people have seen it, how many people are engaging with that post, and that you could use as a metric to kind of measure your outreach. I think us still with a lot of posts.
Yeah, and I mean, because Facebook produces, I recently had a contact with the New York Times reporter, and she asked me to just help her recruit some families. I put a little post on our Facebook page, and in 24 hours, Facebook shows this big, expansive thing. There were 884 responses, right? And so, that's the kind of metric it looks like it could be very, very useful in this kind of situation. And so that is the kind of thing that people might report back to NSF to say, we did this, we got this response, et cetera.
Yep.
That's fantastic, Peter. I often have a note of caution for people who say they're going to start a Facebook page as part of their broader impacts, because it will take you a long time, depending on the subject, but it can take you years literally to get from, you and your partner and your two friends in the department following the page to, a true community. But if you already have
we started this years
awesome.
ago. It was a running joke in the lab until suddenly it wasn't.
That's fantastic. Also, I think underappreciated, but very powerful is your ability to do Facebook Live events. So you can actually
Write that down.
do an event. In fact, you can do a Zoom event that goes to Facebook Live. And so you're able to make a small presentation and have live interaction with people. They can comment, they can post questions, they can react with the, Facebook hearts and thumbs up and so on. And so the other thing that's kind of cool is that all of the people who follow your page see a little alert when you go live if they're on Facebook. And so you can reach people who they don't necessarily have to have planned to be there. Like on Zoom, you kind of have to know that it's happening, schedule the time, click the link. This is a little more passive. And so you might find that you could reach a good crowd that way.
Interesting. Yeah,
possibly scary, but also cool.
Yeah. One of my students just told me that there are actually events that are now hosted on the video game, the multiplayer game Minecraft.
Oh, sure.
And I did not know that, but I'm actually studying Minecraft, and I'm gonna have to find out how these things work. That might be a thing. I'm literally going to be talking about using Minecraft in my next MSF proposal.
There's several virtual campuses. I haven't heard of a Binghamton one, but I'm a graduate at University of Rochester, and I know that there's a virtual, like Rush Rees is their library. There's a virtual Rush Rees that you can go to in Minecraft already. So yeah.
Interesting.
Also, there's that kind of platform to watch people play video games, like Twitcher.
Oh yeah, yes,
People
I know that. Yes.
To post their lab tours of their scientific labs on Twitcher now.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of doing a tour, watching people play a video game, they walk around there. They show them doing research.
That's interesting.
Sangwon Yoon, did you have a question?
I'm good. Thank you.
I think Robert has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I was just going to comment that this was the idea of broader impacts was on my mind a little bit. There's a podcast I've been listening to a lot called This Week in Virology, because there's a lot of news in the world of virology these days, and I think that started out as a broader impacts type approach for this this virologist out at Columbia, and he just for years he's done this. He just kind of hosts a weekly podcast with a few other virologists, and they talk about what's new in their field. And of course now their podcast has like really gained a lot of popularity and new listeners and stuff like that because of recent events. And so it was just kind of interesting to see how something like that can really blossom depending on, I guess, what's happening in the world or what people's level of interest is.
There was a great podcast in 4 parts that a student did as part of a research day's presentation a couple weeks ago, focused on the Armenian genocide and some like oral history kind of research that she had done in Binghamton, where there's a lot of people who are Armenian or descended from Armenian families. So she's a student of Sydney Dement in Harper. And yeah, definitely an unusual way of like capturing some, social science kind of research.
Interesting. All right.
I know, and given the current situation with COVID, there are a lot of GIS maps to help people visualize the spread of the virus as kind of a way to do kind of outreach for epidemiology. And the company Esri that kind of sells the big GIS program, Geographic Information System, they've been really marketing that application in their sales.
Yeah, Peter, like I think people like you and others who do who deals with people in the community, where you have subjects come into the lab and stuff like that, like you've kind of already got like a natural audience there that you're connected with, and that's great. I think it's a really nice thing to be able to leverage.
Yeah, I got to be careful about leveraging it, but it works as long as I don't do too much of it. It was pretty helpful to me, folks. I'm going to be in touch with Rachel as I develop my current proposal for July. Thanks very much. It was really useful.
I concur. Thank you guys so much for organizing this today. It was so helpful.
And please, if you have questions about use of social media or you're contemplating an event via Zoom or things like that, we are, both in Mike's office and my team developing, every week we're a little more sophisticated in our ability to help you with moderating Zoom events and so forth. So if there's things like that you would like to try, but you're a little hesitant or you have questions about the technology, don't let that hold you back. We can help you rehearse or even help you moderate it.
Will do. Thank you.
And I just want to before everyone heads out, let's put a quick plug in for Center for Civic Engagement. I mean, we've worked a lot with folks to obviously reach out to our 100+ community partners to make these links as well. So there's lots of opportunities in the nonprofit world too. So thank you.
If you're looking for community partners to engage with, definitely reach out to CCE.
Oh, and also I see this webinar is being recorded. So I was wondering if the video is going to be made available somewhere.
We're planning to have a whole set of the town halls related to the coronavirus, as well as these professional development workshops through the Vice President for Research page. So we'll be in touch with the link.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
All right, see you all.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.